I'm Julia, and welcome back to Race to Win, the sailing podcast where we use 3D replays of actual races to discuss tactics, rules, and more. This is our 25th podcast. Yay! Today, we're going to be looking at a race in beautiful Port Townsend, Washington, which is a great little Victorian seaport. If you've ever been up in that part of the world, it's just a hop, skip, and a jump from my hometown of Seattle, Washington. And Jim Heumann, Jim, I hope I'm pronouncing your last name right, has kindly agreed to talk to us. The focus of today is how important it is to play those wind shifts and what a difference it can make in even a really short race. So hey, Jim, and thanks so much for talking to me today. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what the conditions were like for this race.
Well, on this race, it was the last one of our last two races of our fall series, and so there were only about 6 boats out in this race, and the two here that we see are Thunderbirds. So we actually have a pretty big or growing Thunderbird fleet in Port Townsend, and there were 4 out on this day, only 2 that were recording.
Those Thunderbirds or T-Birds are really cool wooden boats. If you're not familiar with them, you should look them up. There's quite a fleet in the Pacific Northwest. So Jim, tell us what's happening here in this leg of the first race that we're looking at.
So we're way ahead here, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're like 300 meters ahead, and we stopped paying attention to Boreas. And, you know, there's another boat behind us, and we're just saying, okay, we got to cover them. They're a good boat, and we happen to be ahead. And Boreas takes off on the right. They see wind to the right that we weren't paying attention because Boreas was so far behind us that we didn't think they were even in the race. And you'll see they come back and they beat us. Even though we're 300 meters ahead here, they beat us by 150 meters.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. That was kind of a big loss there. Now, do you think maybe there was, it looks to me, looking at the replay, I can see some dips in your track, and it looks like there might have been some wind shifts that you missed.
There was a header that we didn't tack on because we were covering this other boat because we weren't worrying about Boreas because we thought we were so far ahead that there's no way that it could catch up.
I think if you'd tacked there, things could have gone a lot differently for you.
Right, yeah, I agree.
Well, you got him back on the second race, so let's go look at that one. So this is the race that I originally picked out for the podcast, and Jim was kind enough to point out the contrast with the first race and how they had missed these wind shifts the first time, but then by playing them the second time, they were able to stay ahead of Boreas. And so here they are at the start, going down. They're going to stay about 30 or 40 meters apart through this whole thing. I have it in hyperspeed, just so you can sort of get a sense of what was happening in the race before we get to the pivotal moment. Boreas is catching up a little bit here, but you can see that tack didn't go very well. And it gets really shifty right here. I can tell that by looking at the changes in the tracks here. These guys are good sailors, so I know that they're just not driving crazily. They're getting lifted and knocked here, as you can see. It definitely seems like things are going a bit better for you this race, Jim. Why do you think that is?
So in this race, we were making a real effort to try to tack on these headers. We've had a history of just sort of not doing that enough. And so we've been trying to do it more, trying not to go all the way out to the ley line and then getting stuck out there.
Let's actually watch you do that here. Big knock. Look at that. That's a big knock. And at this point, this is where things are going to get interesting. Now, remember, in the last race, Boreas did really well by taking this flyer out to the right-hand side where there's a lot more wind.
Yep.
And they're probably thinking, well, we're behind anyways. At this point, we don't just want to keep following them. We're going to go over here where we know there's more wind. Now, the tuna, on the other hand, is going to stick with what's working well for them, which is going up the middle and playing these shifts. So you can see right here, they were getting lifted, they get this huge knock, and they tack right on it. Whereas Boreas is riding out. Hey, by the way, did you know that you can click on these trajectory lines right here, and for each segment, get your course, speed, and VMG?
Oh, no, I didn't know that. Wow. Oh.
Just because it makes it a little easier to see, I'm going to turn off the tracks for a second. And so as you can see, as they're both approaching the mark, the VMG for Boreas is 2.5, even though their speed is 4.5. Whereas since the tuna is getting right where they're going from playing those shifts, their speed in VMG is exactly the same. Which is why once they go around the mark, the tuna ends up being 155 meters ahead of Boreas. So let's just take a quick look at the overall picture here of this leg by taking a click on the versus button here.
Yeah, I'd forgotten about this feature. I'm glad you did this. There's so much in here that you just forget. Okay, so we went 0.99 and they went 1.2 miles, and they went faster.
I love this tool. And so even though they sailed about 5% faster, you guys sailed about 8% less distance just with geometry. You were going the right way.
Yeah, that's true.
So I hope that this shows everybody how important even a slight wind shift can be in the overall scheme of things. And I just want to really thank Jim for taking the time to talk to me today. And I can't wait to interview some more of you guys about what you're doing out there so that we can all learn and sail smarter. See you next time.
If you enjoyed this podcast, you can find more on our website, www.raceQs.com/podcast, or search for raceQs on iTunes and click subscribe.